first say I'm not a speaker, I'm not a preacher, and this is probably the first time I've ever done this. So bear with me, and we'll get through this together. But let me first thank Pastor Smith for giving me the opportunity. Anytime you can stand in God's house, before the pulpit, you feel privileged. And thank the congregation for allowing me to speak. This is Baptist Men's Day, and I have a lot of information to share with you. But a couple months ago, when Donna, my sister, asked me if I would mind coming by and speaking on a couple of trips that I went on, it wasn't a big deal. I quickly said yes, and I'm thinking, probably a small church, not a big deal, not a lot of preparation, and we really didn't talk about it very much after that. Over the next 2 months, but God started speaking to me, and he and I had a lot of conversations, and even this morning. So he kind of changed the scope of kind of what I was going to talk about, and so I want to share a lot of that with you, and hopefully it'll mean something to you, because it certainly means something to me. But first, let me start, and you know who I am. My wife Terry, and this year we'll be sharing our 50th year of marriage and anniversary. So in September we'll be married 50 years. So, and regardless what she tells you, well, she wasn't 5 years old when we got married. So, but God's really blessed our lives, and we have 2 sons, Stuart and Reed. Reed lives in Fort Mill, has a wife, and our grandson Wilder, and found out at Christmas that we're expecting a granddaughter in July, be the first female in her side of the family since she was born. So we're looking forward to having a female in the family, and look forward to that. Stuart, our other son, lives up in the Washington, D.C. area, and is in the financial legal business, and he has a girlfriend, Flannery, which we also consider part of our family, and she just finished her master's degree at George Mason University, and they're loving life and having fun, and if you can enjoy the Washington, D.C. area, that's what they're doing. So, but that's where he's spending his career. But we've been blessed with 2 great sons, and every morning when we get up, we just thank the Lord, what have we done to deserve what he's provided for us. So, actually, when I started this, I didn't even prepare any notes, but the Lord told me you probably want to write a few things down. I work at the Charlotte Douglas Airport as a logistics manager, and Terry still works for Pioneer Motor Bearing, and we're trying hard to consider retiring, and we want to, need to, but we just can't figure out what the process is. And Donna and our other sisters are trying to help us figure that out, but we need to do that. So one of the problems with getting older, you need glasses for some things you don't, so you try to figure that out. So, having said all of that, let me just kind of move into some things, and I'm going to talk about a couple things today, and it's a couple different messages, but let me start, and there's a verse early in the Bible in Genesis that says when God's speaking to Abraham, and as he's trying to make plans to send him out, And to read that verse, it says, "For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what has been promised." That's a powerful verse of Scripture. My story begins with these 2 people, and that's Coy and Agnes Smith. That's my mother and father, and it's just a surprise to my family that I'm going to show this, but my roots go back to this 68 and a half years ago. Our parents, This next picture is going to really surprise people, but it's about 60 years old as well. But Corey and Agnes had 10 kids. This is 9 of them. The little circle represents 4 that's gone to be with the Lord. But all of those kids, you know, Corey and Agnes raised those kids to love the Lord and raised them in the church. And, you know, some of my best memories as a kid was, you know, 2 of the sisters that's there, my oldest sister, Bernice, you know, one of my best childhood memories, I think I must have been 5 or 6 years old when she scooped me up on Easter Sunday, and we probably walked 1.5 miles with heavy frost. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a heavy frost on the ground. We walked about 1.5 miles at 6 o'clock in the morning to Easter sunrise service at the graveyard up in on River Street in Anderson, and it was cold, and you know that that memory still is burning today. Elaine, my other sister, you know, I credit her with teaching me how to drive, and that's where I learned my driving skills. And so, you know, most of my family knows I'm probably one of the best drivers in the family. So, Elaine gets the credit for that.
You taught me to drive.
But the rest of my family, I'm just, you know, my parents, there's a verse in Proverbs that says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. You know, if you go back to this picture here, you know, all of those kids, and I can probably say for all of us, we didn't always do what was right. We probably all had our problems growing up. We probably, you know, strayed from the Lord at times. We weren't perfect angels. But, you know, the way we were raised as kids was very important, and the Lord carried us through those hard times and made us who we are today. And, you know, I circled this picture here because, you know, our 4 siblings that are with God today, you know, we all look forward to joining them today, and we feel comfort that they rest with the Lord today. So, you know, Corey and Agnes did a very good job raising us, and I think most of us can say that we've done everything we could to raise our kids. You know, you can't do everything for everybody, for your children, but you can at least try to raise them up in God's house and teach them what's right and wrong. So that's kind of where I start out with this, and wanted to share that before I get into the next part. I wanted to share this picture because most of these people are here today, except for Elaine and my sister-in-law, Mary, who was my oldest brother's wife. But you know, the other 4 women are here today, including Terry, my wife. But these are very, they're important to me today, important to me growing up, and part of the reason I'm standing up here today. And so I just want to share that picture. That picture's kind of old, and we were all a little bit younger, but that was at my son's wedding. And but God knew what he was doing when he created Eve and created women, because they really are the backbone for most men in the families. The women are the strength of the families. Now I'll get into what I really came here for today, and moving into that, which is a Baptist Men's Day. My story kind of starts, you know, I came from as a teenager, let me pull my notes out here. As a teenager, even backing up further than that, fresh out of high school, I began a career as an industrial electrician. This was an opportunity afforded to me by my brother, who was given that opportunity by, I call them my uncles. We had a debate yesterday whether he's truly a blood uncle, but, you know, I call him Uncle Hoyt Green, who also has a relative in the back, Debbie in the back here. But Hoyt was my aunt's brother, my dad's sister-in-law's brother. And Hoyt and his sons they worked for the Davis Electrical, which is one of the largest electrical companies at that time. They gave Mike his start. My brother, Mike, afforded me that opportunity. I eventually afforded that opportunity to my brother John, who does that work today. And I will share with you that during that career as an electrician, I worked for a member of this church, Richard Hood. Most of you know Richard, or knew Richard, and I met his brother today. But I worked for a short while for Richard in Greenville back in the 70s. And so God has a way of tying things together. But I thought a lot of Richard, and I also worked for his brother George for a short while. But for about 12 years, I worked as an electrician, and I moved from an apprentice all the way up to basically like a project manager, and was working for George, doing small projects throughout South Carolina and Florida, and living in Florence, South Carolina. And after about 12 years, God asked, and I give God the credit for this, he moved me to Kings Mountain to start up the first compact disc plant in the world. And Terry and I moved to Kings Mountain, and shortly after that, for some reason or the other, I felt an inclination through God's pull to get out of the electrical business. And I mean, I still work for the same company, but basically I changed fields. And for the next 15 years, I used to kid people, I couldn't even spell electricity. I completely deserted my craft. I was more into manufacturing management and logistics, and I had nothing whatsoever to do with electrical work. One day at First Baptist Church in Kings Mountain, I was speaking with a member of our church, and I have this picture up here, Dick Fisher, who taught electricity at the local community college. He and I were having a casual conversation, and I let slip out that I used to do electrical work. Dick and I continued to talk, and he said, hey, we have a trip planned to Honduras coming up. I sure could use some help doing some electrical work down there. So I said, well, okay. I was hesitant at first to go to Honduras, but I really wasn't really excited about getting back into electrical work because I felt like I had moved on from that. But I went. So we go to Honduras. This is a church in Honduras, and to tell the story real quickly, a member of our church, two members, Donna and Chris Keeter from our church, were missionaries in Honduras, and they were partnered with a pastor in Honduras who was getting this church established in San Ignacio, Honduras, and this is a picture of the church. So we go to Honduras, and while I'm there, and this is a very important picture here, Chris is building this structure here. You see this picture? And what this is basically like a dorm room. I mean, he's building a facility because in San Ignacio, it's about 3 hours from the city, and there's no hotels or anything. But he's basically, and Chris, back up just a second, Chris basically sold everything he had in the U.S. and moved to Honduras, bought 10 acres of land, and started, building a ministry in Honduras. And so he was constructing this building down there, and I was checking it out, and I said, well, what kind of provisions have you made to do the electrical? And he said, we haven't made any. We're just depending on God to provide that. And so the more I studied on it that week, I said, I can do that. And before I left Honduras that week, I told him, I said, well, he gave me a small sketch of the building. I went back to the U.S., and over the next 6 months drew up electrical plans, and we drew up the plans, gathered the materials, and about 10 months later, I took a group of, and I was probably in my mid-50s at the time. There was about 14 senior men. Most of the men were retired electricians in their 60s and 70s, and we went to Honduras, and in about 10 days, we wired this building for Chris, and I'm talking about completely wired it, run conduit, electrical wires, installed ceiling fans, because they have no air conditioner or anything down there. But we completely wired this building in a little less than 10 days. So that was a situation that, you know, God said, you can do this, you need to do this. And so that kind of put me back into the electrical business, so to speak. So I got more and more involved in that, and so to speak, the cat was out of the bag. So at my church, that, you know, I was an electrician. So you know, up to that point, it was mine and God's secret. So what I'm going to show you now is a continuation of a lot of that. But this is a church in San Ignacio, and this is about 2008. Chris and Donna's ministry down there, the way they build the church is they have what they call a feeding center, and they invite all the kids in the community, in the town, on Saturdays in, and they teach them hygiene. Each kid has their own little hygiene kit. They at least once a week make sure they do their proper hygiene. They give them a good meal. It's almost like a one-day Bible school, but one day a week they have almost 75 kids come in. And with that, of course, they bring the parents in, and that's how they build their church, through the ministry of the kids. But they've been doing that now. This is Chris and Donna, and on my last trip down in October, this is them. The church is giving them a little memorial plaque for 20 years of service in San Ignacio, Honduras. This is Chris and Donna Keeter, and they've been serving the ministry down there for 20 years now. So that was a part of my trip down there, is to be able to go back and see how much progress. Now, we did some work as well, but it was an opportunity for me to see how much progress had been made since my first trip was down there in about 2009. This is a picture of that same church I showed you earlier. This is how much the church has grown, and you can see the difference on the inside of the church. Now, this is not the only church or ministry that's been going on down there. This is like the home-based church, but they have built 9 other churches going out about 70 miles from this church. That's how much the ministry has spread over the last 20 years. So, so that ministry continues to grow. And again, the building that I showed you earlier that we built years back, that houses the mission teams that goes down annually. Each year, it's not just from our church, other churches in North Carolina and South Carolina send mission teams down there. And they have projects set up to go out to different areas and different churches, and they have, you know, they do work and they do ministry as well. So that's the work that's going on in Honduras. Another verse I just like to mention that kind of speaks, it kind of spoke to me, but it kind of speaks to anybody that gets involved in mission work. In Isaiah 6:8, you know, and this is after the prophet Isaiah, after he's confessed all of his sins to the Lord. He says, "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Who shall I send, and who will go for us?' And I said, 'Here am I, send me.'" So that speaks volumes to you when you know that you're there, you're the one, you need to go. If you're available, you need to go. So that's an important verse when you're trying to serve the Lord and you're doing mission work, because it's tough to go, and, Honduras is not a great place to go visit. You're not going there for sun and fun. You're going down there to work. And, but, again, that's one of my favorite verses, and probably one of the favorite verses of anybody that served mission. This is that same building I showed you earlier. This is a picture that I took on my last visit. This upstairs is where Chris and Donna stay. The bottom portion, the way it's laid out, is there's like 5 rooms of bunks, and this building will hold like probably up to 30 people. And it's kind of laid out where the women could be on one side, the men can be on one side, and the middle is set up for like a big dining room. But it's set up for mission teams to come down there. And so this is the finished product of that building that I showed you that we were building 20 years ago. This is a shot that I took when I was down there. They were having a kids' Olympic Day. Again, this is another way that you can see all the parents there lined up to watch the kids do the Olympics. This is another way that they bring the parents in to get them in so they can share God's word with them. And another way to build their ministry and build their churches. But you can see the turnout that they have. This was on a Saturday for the Children's Olympics. And that's just one of my favorite shots that I took many years ago. It's one of my favorite pictures. So that is Honduras. Now the next part that I'm going to show you a few years later, someone came to me and asked me to go to Liberia, Africa. And Liberia has a long story that I can't really have time to get into, but Liberia is a country in Africa that was actually started, has a long American history. Back in the early 1800s, Thomas Jefferson sent 11,000 freed slaves back to Africa and basically just dumped them off there. And so those Americanized slaves started, establishing a home in West Africa where you already had Africans living there. Well, because of what the Americanized slaves had already learned, they quickly established dominance over the indigenous Africans living there. So over the next 150 years, you can imagine the friction that generated. Well, in 1989, that friction erupted into a civil war that lasted almost 20 years. So Liberia, Africa, in the 40s and 50s was one of the most prosperous African countries. But as a result of that 20-year civil war, it was stripped to the hub. I'm talking about all electricity in the whole country was stripped. In all the movies you see about child soldiers and wars, all that was real life in Liberia for 20 years. So this gentleman here, Ola Minje, was a high school senior when that civil war erupted. Now, let me back up and say, Liberia also has a heavy Baptist influence. The Baptists have been ingrained in Liberia since the 1800s. And actually, the Baptists have a seminary now in Liberia. But Ola Minje was the 18-year-old son of a Baptist minister in Liberia. When the Civil War erupted, he was smuggled out of the country by Baptist missionaries and brought to the U.S. and actually landed in Truett McConnell College, if I said that right, which is the same college that one of your members, Pat Seegers, went to. But he went to Truett McConnell College, graduated, went to Mercer University, got a bachelor's degree, went on to Duke Theological Seminary, got a degree at Duke, and long story short, ended up getting about 3 or 4 other degrees. And by the time he finished his education and the war ended, he went back to Liberia and asked the president of the country how could he help the country, get started. And they asked him to reestablish Rick's Institute, which was a big school in Liberia that was responsible for training a lot of the leaders of the country. So our church, through some other churches, got engaged with Dr. Minjay, and so we were asked, I was asked to join 2 other members of our church that had electrical experience to go to Liberia to do some work at the school. And I show this picture because this kind of tells a story. There's 2 big things here. There's a cell phone tower and a water tower. The cell phone tower is important because there's no electricity on this facility at all. I mean, the whole country is powered by huge generators run by foreign countries. But the cell phone company asked the school if they would allow them to put a cell phone tower on the property, which the cell phone towers were run by generators. And if they allowed them to install the cell phone tower, they would give them 210 electrical circuits off their generators. So they agreed to do that. So where that comes in is we went over and began running the electrical lines from the generators over to wells, installed new well pumps in the wells to pump water to the water towers. This is another picture of the water tower, which allowed them to pump water to their crops, which allowed them to grow food for the school. So Mike and another member of our church, Mike Lambert and myself, went over, and that's what we did is we went over, actually took our financial resources, had to purchase the pumps and the wire and everything at outrageous prices over there, and installed the wiring and everything, and got these pumps running, got running water to the crops before we left that week. And it's amazing how much work you can get done with God's help in a week's time. But by the end of the week, we had running water to these cisterns, which allowed them to irrigate their crops to grow food. So that was the purpose of our first food. And I'll back this picture up because I wanted to show it to you. I called this was where we stayed. It was a little building, I call it Hotel Liberia. Really, it was just a room. And I highlight the guard station because the 3 of us were staying in this room. And at night, I could hear this guy walking around the building. And so I asked somebody the next day, I said, what is this guy doing? And he said, that's the guard. And I said, guarding what? He says, guarding you. And turns out this guy, all he's armed with is a machete. And so at night, all he did was walk round and around the building and was keeping us safe. And so I didn't know that. So the rest of the week I slept kind of lightly. So, but anyway, that was the kind of environment we were in because it wasn't the best environment, but God had his way of looking out for us. So again, that was another way that God allowed me to use something he had provided early in my life to do the will to help other people. Okay, this is just another shot. The other thing is we had to do a lot of our work at night because the cell phone company used most of the power during the daytime. So the power that we were allowed to use, the school was allowed to use, was at night. So all the wiring and everything that we did during the daytime, we had to test it at night. So this was a shot with me and three of the gentlemen. Two of them are in their 70s and are going to be with the Lord today, but this is just, we had to do our work at night, a lot of it. So about 3 years later, the Lord called on me again to make another trip to Liberia. This time our pastor from our church was going to Liberia to actually lead a pastor's training conference with Liberian pastors. And in order to do that, they had a building that they were going to use to house the pastors, and they were coming from all over Liberia. But it badly needed some roofing and some electrical work done. So they asked Mike and myself if we could go over and make preparations to get that work done so that Brother Chip and his staff could go over and they were going to do about a 10-day pastor training program in Liberia. So we made plans to do that. Again, here's another verse that's close to me, is John 20:21. And in this verse here, I just make a note here. Jesus is providing reassurance to the apostle. This is his first appearance after the resurrection. And his message to them is to continue to spread the gospel throughout the world. And he says, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you. And that's a message that he's really giving to all of us. And so that's an important verse. But again, we're making plans to go to Africa, Mike and myself, and this time we're taking our wives. And Terry makes this comment. She said, well, I know why you're going, I know why you're going, and I know why she's going, but I'm not sure why I'm going. And she found out when we got over there why the Lord was sending her over there. So she's very big into children education, and this is a picture with her with the principal of the children's school. And this is a classroom over there. And it's very dark, and of course it's dark because they have no electricity. They depend on the light from the windows for all their lighting. So this is a picture of Terry getting an opportunity to actually teach the classroom at the school over there. So I think a couple of days the teachers actually turned the classroom. She was actually prepared the lesson plans and was able to teach the classroom for a couple of days in the class over there. I don't know if I can make that any better, but it's dark because it was dark there. This is just a picture of each day we had to hike about a half a mile from where we stayed to where we were actually, engaging in the work and stuff. So this is just a shot on that morning trip. And again, in Africa at 7 o'clock in the morning, it's already 90 degrees. So it's hot. The second part of our venture, there's a village nearby. And this is just a shot of the village, and this is a very poor village. This is what you would call your typical African village. Again, this is an opportunity. God's sharing his word with these people. But we made preparations prior to going to this trip. And to get to this is not a very good picture. You can't see it. But you actually had to hike across this rickety bridge to get across it, almost like you would see in the movies. I'm not sure there's piranhas in the river, but you had to actually hike across the bridge to get to this little village. And this picture here are the kids, and Terry and Mike's wife had taken over on our trip. All this clothing that you see on these kids, the women's from our church made these dresses for the kids, and we took them over on our trip. When we make these trips over, you wouldn't believe how much luggage we take. We take like 20 suitcases full of stuff. We pay a lot of money, to take it, but we take a lot of stuff with us. But the women in our church made all these little dresses and stuff for these kids, and we took T-shirts for the boys and everything, not knowing how many we had, but we just took a lot. So when they got over there and we visited that village, they were able to hand the clothing out to the kids, and prior to that, they had very little clothing to wear. But she can probably tell another story about when they were handing these things out. It come down to they were like one T-shirt short. They had like one kid that they didn't have clothing for, and somehow they were able to manipulate things, and they come up with another shirt from somewhere, and they were able to give every kid a piece of clothing. And this is her on our way back from that village back over to the school. These are kids where she was teaching the classroom, and I kid her about this because from her 2 days of teaching the other class, it was almost like she was a rock star. When she came back from the villages, each day they would meet her coming back across the bridge and everything, and surround her and everything. And I told her, I said, you almost like a rock star or something, This is one little shot. I couldn't resist showing this, but this was on Sunday morning, and I was just walking around the village, and this is a little kid getting his Sunday morning bath. And I'm telling you, even though you're in Africa, these people believe in being clean. And this lady is scrubbing this little boy, and I had to take a picture of it because she scrubbed it probably, I don't know if it's ivory soap or lye soap or what, but she is scrubbing him from head to toe, getting ready to go to church. Our next part of this adventure here, and again, we're over there about 8 days, so it's from sun up to sundown. We're doing some work. But this is a third village that we're visiting, and this is actually these are all, what does it, help me out, Terry? The kids are orphans. Words slipped me. So all the kids at this school here are orphans from the war. They lost their parents in the war. So this school is going to be even different. You can see the inside of this school compared to the other schools. See the construction of the walls and everything? These are the beds. There's probably 15 kids that sleep in these are where the orphans sleep. And here we're discussing, we're actually funding improving the conditions at this orphanage. And we're kind of discussing some of the plans of improving the conditions at this place. And this is not just work going on from our church. There's a lot of the Baptist Mission is funding some of this, and there's other organizations that's funding some of this. So this is not just work that we're doing. But it's stuff that we get to take part in, that God allows us. And here's a shot of the kids from that orphanage. If you see how the kids are dressed, and you see how the kids from that other school are dressed, one of the reasons they try to put them in uniforms is because in Liberia there's like 60,000 orphans. And the only way they can keep track of who is part of their group is they have to put them in uniform. Because if they didn't, the next morning 20 new ones would show up. So they have to keep their kids in a uniform so they know that they're part of their group. That's the reason they have clothing like that. And but there's some, you see the bags from Dillard's, and so this is stuff that we took over on our trip, and we're getting ready to hand it out to that group. But this is an orphanage over there, so So that, that was our second trip to Africa. And, again, that's, anytime you go on these trips and you return, you're the one that's blessed. You're not doing, you don't feel like you've done anything for other people. You come back with more blessings than you've blessed other people. And you just feel very privileged that God's allowed you to take part in those things. So, and I will add to you that just recently they've asked us to join the North Carolina Baptist group. They're trying to organize a trip to go back to Liberia. They had planned it for February, but now I think they've moved it to November. They want to go back over there and do some exploratory work throughout the country to see what other opportunities that the Baptist Association can do to improve. Liberia is a work in progress. The country was decimated by that war, and it's probably going to take 40 years to get it back to where it was 40 years ago. So just real quickly, I'm going to move on to some other things here, because I know we're running short of time. Some other trips I've been a part of, trips to Rhode Island, Massachusetts. A few years ago, there was a severe storm that came through there that flooded a lot of houses. They asked us to organize a team from our church to go up. This is a typical New England town, looks normal. But what happened here is the floods flooded all the basements of those houses. And you can see the mold and everything set in, and FEMA came in and basically made people evacuate. And so we sent a team in and basically started rebuilding some people's homes. This was a couple that we worked in. And we also shared the Word of God with most of these people. I won't say most of them. A lot of these people are not Christians. And we take the opportunity to share the Word with the families there. But this was a couple that at the end of the week, we start each day with a word of prayer and end it with a word of prayer. And by the third day, they were joining us in the morning and the evening as we had prayer. Again, I'm going to flip through these things. This was when Hurricane Katrina hit Mississippi. We sent a cooking team actually down there just to cook. They had like 1,400 workers in the Katrina area. So we sent a team from our church down there just to cook. And these weren't just young puppies either. These are senior citizens that went down. And they weren't just men, they were women, But we went down and for about 10 days did nothing but cook for about 1,400 people. We do local projects. This is where we're building handicap ramps in town, around North Carolina. And we just continue to do whatever the Lord asks us to do. So those are just many examples that we try to do, and not just that I do, but the Baptist men of my church and of North Carolina that we try to do. And just a couple quick things. In the Great Commission, Jesus commands us to preach the gospel to all nations and people, work miracles in Jesus' name to testify to the gospel, baptize new believers, and disciple those who receive Christ. And that's really our mission and what we try to do in all these efforts that we try to take part in. And really, we talked about earlier about our family, but at the end we talk about our family of God. And in John 3:3 it says, "Very truly I tell you, no one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again." So that's really the bottom line is saving souls. So that's the end of my presentation, and I appreciate the time. I know I probably ran over, but it's a lot of information, and hope I didn't bore you, but I did the best I could. And I thank you. I'll turn it back over.